This podcast is sponsored with this house ad for Pitch Club, the monthly Substack where you read cold pitches and hear the authors audio annotating their thinking behind how they sold and crafted their pitches that landed a publication and some serious coin. Welcome to pitchclub.substack.com. To subscribe, forever free. You read a little, you listen a little, you learn a lot. And this podcast is also brought to you by the word pummel, to beat or thrash with, as if with the fists. A career in journalism will often pummel you into submission. Pummel.
Shit, did I make a bad decision by even doing this story?
So fucking tired of hearing my own voice.
Ho, 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 CNFers, it's Father CNF, Saint CNF, Santa CNF. Did you do the thing yesterday? Yesterday being the day many do the thing with the presents in the tree and the tolerating of the family. Did you get too drunk? Did you eat too much? Is 2026 going to be your year? I got some intention. I got some goals. I'll share those next year. Today we've got a fun one, aren't they all? With CNF Pod regular Leah Sottile, investigative journalist, podcaster, and author of Blazing Eyes Sees All and When the Moon Turns to Blood. But we also have her longtime collaborative partner, Ryan Haas. They are primarily here to talk about Season 2 of Hush, an incredible series put out by Oregon Public Broadcasting that chronicles how a small town has, to date, failed to bring closure on the death of 18-year-old Sarah Zuber in 2019, who was found dead 400 feet from her driveway in Rainier, Oregon. The red herring of it all is that this podcast series starts like a classic true crime yarn, but it quickly becomes an interrogation of the true crime genre. You know, one of Leah's great lines in her narration is that this isn't true crime so much as it is bureaucratic horror in a small town in Columbia County. Oh, and here we go. Well, we got a new review for the podcast. Okay, now buckle up for this. And I'm sorry if this isn't a good color on me, but I really can't help it. Okay, deep breath. So here's a 1-star review from some motherfucker called Bury the Lead. As you know, I read all the reviews that come in, and I debated whether I would dignify this one with a response. But because it's so baselessly false, I feel like I need to go to bat for the show and for myself. I'll likely post this to Instagram and Blue Sky and newsletter as well, because I need to defend the show's and my, quite frankly, reputation. So, titled from, all right, so it's from this person, Bury the Lead, and it said, titled, "Stop Dissing on Your Daily News Colleagues. News reporting has a place to provide the public with immediate information. Daily news reporters receives long-form diehards the ability to do what they do because they don't have the responsibility to keep the public informed." Okay. Are we gonna long form a sudden natural disaster? Don't think so. Okay. Of course, news reporting has a place to provide the public with immediate information. But that place isn't on this podcast. Not once have I dissed my daily news colleagues. If anything, I have begrudged that it's just not within my skill set to do so. But I've never belittled or besmirked, dissed, or disparaged daily news reporters doing those reports. Breaking news. This review is baseless and meaningless because my show doesn't deal with daily news reporting or reporters or breaking news. I deal primarily in books and long-form features, slow journalism, because that's where my taste is. So fuck you, Bury the Lead. Fuck you, and go listen to The Daily. Better yet, start your own breaking news podcast and talk to all the other people covering zoning boards and school board meetings, and the beat reporters covering cops and courts, natural disasters, and car accidents. Have at it. What's left of them. This is the Creative Nonfiction Podcast, and no, Daily reporting, breaking news does not fall under that umbrella. Caught me in a mood. Ho, ho, ho. Show notes to this episode and more at brendanamaro.com. Hey, bookmark it so you can browse for hot blogs and sign up for my 2 very important newsletters, the flagship Rage Against the Algorithm and Pitch Club. Welcome to pitchclub.substack.com. Also, if you care to support the podcast with a few dollar bills, visit patreon.com/CNF Pod. It's probably where I'll host the hashtag Flash 52 sessions. These will be little writing sprints, about 30 minutes or so, as I try to personally write 52 Flash essays this year. Plus, just imagine how much you'll be helping me out, the podcast, and other writers by joining the CNF and Patreon community, like the audio magazine. I'm getting through the code essays, I swear. It's going to happen soon. If you think each podcast is worth 50 cents to $1 a week, give it a try. Okay, so this is really cool. I love getting a chance to chat with Leah, and this was special to hear from Ryan Haas, too, who up until recently spent more than a dozen years at OPB. He and Leah worked on the Epic Bundyville podcast, which was like tethered with OPB and long reads, and they did 2 seasons of Hush. I'm going to miss Hush because I would run 5 miles listening to primarily Leah, though Ryan pops in every now and again, narrate this incredible story about what happens when journalism folds up shop in a small town and when the Greek choir of Facebook is the primary news source. When power-hungry people leverage a tragedy for personal gain, or when law enforcement becomes lax. It's great. It's crazy stuff. In this episode, they talk about the grid of doom, the evolution of their partnership, how they push each other, interrogating the true crime genre, whiteboard conversations, being open to where the reporting goes, being open to complication, finding the cliffhangers, and breaking news. Towards the end of the podcast, you're going to hear exactly what Leah and Ryan are up to, the future of their work. Parting shot on the absurdity of performative writing, but for now, it's high time we cue up the montage.
People who do this for fame are foolish.
It's so true. I actually would not mind just growing people's flowers for them.
Go get a gelato and chill out. And I was like, I can't.
This is going to have to interest somebody somewhere other than me.
We're nerds, so.
Yeah. Story nerds. Yeah, the mechanics of it all, which is like what I find fascinating too, is my God, there's so much of the, as Leah knows from all the times that we've spoken on mic and on the record about this kind of stuff, just my God, this the mechanics of getting it all together and just the process and the doubt that's inherent to it. It's always fun to unpack. Not fun to experience, but fun to unpack.
It never feels like it's going to come together until it does.
I feel like it's so brutal in the process too. Like the closer you get to the end, you're like, I hate this and I'll never do it again.
Yeah.
I always tell my reporters that a story is never good until you actively hate what you're doing and think it sucks.
Yeah. That is so true. Like when I was buttoning up the front runner with my Prefontaine book, like it's the amount of rewrites that in the rereading of the thing. I mean, I probably went through it 10 to maybe a dozen times towards the end in the final 8 months of getting it really buttoned up. And to this day, I still haven't read anything except my short little reading that I'll do at readings or events. Like I can't even touch it. Like to me, I just want to barf every time I look at my own words. I'm like, I can't go near it again.
Totally. Same.
Yeah. Like Leah, do you have like when you would similarly? Do you just reserve that one passage you read for events and you're like, you haven't looked at the rest of it?
Yeah, like I feel like the stuff, you probably have this too, like with nonfiction, there's not always a ton that really works for public readings. So you're pretty restricted in what you can read anyway. And you just get really good at reading that one thing. Yeah. But yeah, like, I mean, I'm so with you, like with books, but especially with podcasts, I get so fucking tired of hearing my own voice. Like, I'm just like, I don't want to listen to myself.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Like I get sick of myself just through the little editing I do with this, because when this is all done, like I only listen to it really one time through, and I clean up things that are redundant, verbal tics and stuff of that nature. So usually my edit ends up being, for an hour-long pod, it's probably like in the neighborhood of 2 hours, and because I edit at a faster speed, and I'm not looking to get move things around too much. It's mainly just to make it a good listener experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, but even just listening to that, I'm like, ugh, I can't do this again.
Enough.
but yeah, but I how many passes does it take you to get to really button up and polish just a single episode of a serialized podcast?
That's a good question. I mean, I think, well, as far as recording, it's interesting. Like Leah has grown so much as a narrator over the course of our work where, when we started, it's hard when someone's new to it and you're just like, say it again, say it again, say it again. Nope, that was bad. Say it again.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but like I feel like I had a particularly brutal beginning radio thing because it was you, me, and Peter Frickwright, who was one of the producers on Bundyville, crammed in the smallest studio ever, and then both saying, "Do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again."
I mean, I wouldn't say you were an outlier. In fact, I would say you're a pretty fast learner. But after that process is over, the editing process starts, which is extensive. Leah created what we fondly call the grid of doom, which is all the steps that need to happen per episode. And so you have, 8 or 9 rows for each episode. And then I don't know, 10 or 12 columns that exist where each of those episodes needs to go through each of those steps. And so, sometimes things get caught in edits, or you listen to something and you're like, I thought this was working. This is not working at all. We need to rewrite this entire episode. And then you're starting the grid of doom over. So
it always strikes me as such a complicated edit, especially later in the process, because the blocks that you're working with are just, they seem, at least to me from the outside, harder to navigate versus, say, writing. Like if something needs to be buttoned up with just writing, it's text, like quotes. If you need to tighten them up, you can tighten up quotes and everything. But when you're dealing with audio and these tracks, like you tighten up a quote or have to move it around, there's a lot of things that can get fucked up if you're not. There's just so many files that are tethered to a single episode that's like, oh my God, it ends up feeling very delicate in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's always a discussion of, especially as you get later in the process, is this edit worth this? Like, it is going to be complicated. This is, when you're talking about mixing, if there's music involved, like all of that affects all these pieces. And so if you're making a change, it really needs to be worth it. But most of the times the change is worth it because it makes it better. And so you just have to suck it up a little bit. Like, as you would with writing, you're like, I don't really want to do this, but it is going to make this better and we need to do it.
Yeah, I remember you bringing up the cost of the edit. When I had Julia Barton on the show, who's more of a story editor who's worked with, Michael Lewis and Malcolm Gladwell, when we were talking about that edit, she's like, yeah, there is that calculus you're thinking of, like, oh, this could use the edit, but it's just like, do we really want to bring someone back into the studio to retrack something? Is it the right time of day because their voice is going to be different in the morning versus the afternoon? And all these things are at play. Like, okay, doing the math, is this actually worth it? And some of the times it is, but other times you're like, you know what? Let's just move on from this.
Yeah, I do feel like sometimes. I mean, I would say that at least with Hush, Ryan and I each listened to the final episode probably 4, 5, 6 times a piece. I mean, probably you more than me, but I'll listen to it several times. Sometimes, I mean, even especially with Hush season 2, there were edits that we would make to the final draft 2 days before it went out, where we were like, okay, actually, no, this line shouldn't be there. Like it's disrupting the flow, or it's just slightly inaccurate, and it's not worth it to put it in. It's going to open up a can of worms. So yeah, we're just both pretty obsessive about it being as perfect as it can be.
I think that is the other part that is challenging with audio, is like one of those steps in the latter part of the grid of doom is like legal and fact checking. And those things can be like, well, technically you say this, but is that 100% accurate? And so those are the kind of edits where it's like, you have to make those. You have to make sure, for us as journalists, it's like it has to be 100% factually accurate, and those are non-negotiable no matter how much of a pain in the ass they're going to be.
And those come really late in the process.
Mhm.
And so when you're thinking about the 7th or 8th episode of an 8-episode series and you're like almost done, and then you get a legal review, and I mean, I probably other people wouldn't put as much time into it as we do, but Ryan and I will have 2-hour calls just to like make sure we're going through things with a fine-tooth comb. And then, and then we got to schedule one more pickup session. I got to drive a half hour to the studio to record one line just to make sure that it's perfect.
Oh, shoot. And you guys have gone back to, you started with Bundyville and you've come to this point. How would you describe the arc of your relationship working together, from then to now?
Yeah. So, I mean, with Bundyville, that was a project that I was working on with long reads, and it was just supposed to be a series of stories. And in fact, it was only supposed to be one story, and then some things happened that made it expand to a series. My editor asked, is it possible that this could be a podcast? And, sort of in a bout of self-confidence, I was like, yeah, totally. I'd never done radio before. I'd been on OPB a couple of times because they'd done a series on the trial that happened around the Malheur occupation. So Ryan and I had at least met before, but really I set up a meeting with OPB and with the editor at the time, Anna Griffin, and she just kind of put me and Ryan in the same room and was like, you guys are working together. And I remember at first being like, wait, do I need this person? Like, I know what I'm doing. I'm writing this series or whatever, and learned very quickly I had no idea how to make audio, no clue, nothing. I knew nothing. And so, we just got together, and that was kind of just the beginning. We also had 2 other, editors that worked and producers on that show. But Ryan and I have continued to work together. I don't know, Ryan, you can explain the rest from there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think we pretty quickly realized we're a good team together. Like, we have different skill sets that complement each other really well. And I think our working relationship has really deepened over the projects that we do. And, every time we work together, I feel like we're better than we were last time, which is a really good feeling. And just going into some of these interviews that we've done over the years with someone who's like a co-equal partner is super helpful. Like, I can't tell you how many times like Leah and I benefit from that dynamic, especially in tough interviews where it's like we can kind of vibe out who is being responded to well and who's not in that interview. Like when we're interviewing the Bundys at their house, like who's taking the lead on that, who needs to step in and kind of distract or ask the tough question. Who's asking the tough question in that interview will change depending on who we're interviewing and who's the bad guy in that interview.
Often me.
Often Leah, she's a tough cookie. I'm the nice
You're
one.
the nice
Just
one.
keep that in mind. So we've really benefited from that. And I think also like we think pretty similarly in terms of like how we investigate things. And so it's great to just be like, you're doing this piece, go investigate that. I'm going to do this piece. And then we come back and be like, look at all this stuff I got. And then we kind of go from there. So I think we've been very lucky in terms of our personalities and working style. We're pretty egoless in what we're doing, which is really helpful.
Do you guys divide and conquer, or are you always together?
I mean, we're extremely collaborative on a lot of things. I mean, we're constantly talking about whatever project we're working on, because usually the project starts with a very small idea, and we're trying to figure out how to widen it. Sometimes it starts really big, and we're just trying to creatively break down what the journalism is that we can do, what creative paths we could take in the investigations. But over time, I think that because we've learned so much about how each other works, like I would equate Ryan to my process as like a person that I would like lift weights with, and that you're kind of trying to like challenge each other a little bit more each time. And so with each project, Ryan will come up with new things that I'm like, oh, that's rad. Like I got to come up with something new that he's going to think is cool or challenges him. So we're always kind of like pushing each other to try new things.
Yeah, I like that idea. And like maybe an idea is small and you're looking to widen it, or maybe it's wide and you're looking to narrow it. Tethering that to just the series of Hush, but maybe this particular season, what was the kernel, the idea you were bringing to this season, and widening it or narrowing it? What was your vision for it and your early pitch for it?
Yeah, I mean, we had been really obsessively looking around for a second season idea, and I looked recently, we had a list of 29 ideas that we were kind of like, well, this could work, that could work, here's the pros and cons of each. But Ryan was actually gone on vacation, and I just happened to be sort of doing my rounds on the internet one day and saw a mention of this 18-year-old girl who had been found dead 400 feet from her front door in rural Oregon, and that nobody knew what happened. And I don't know, I just had a gut feeling about it. Like, it was just that was the kernel of the idea. Like, that is insane. How is that possible? Ryan and I are really good at solving things. We probably could solve this. I mean, I really did bring that like ego to the situation where I was like, we can figure this out. I'll just tell Ryan when he gets back and we'll have it solved in a month, kind of thing. And it obviously was so much more complicated than that. But I think that really, I do remember our first conversations. Ryan was like, I hear you. I trust what you're saying, but is this enough for a whole show? So...
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think the kernel of the idea was interesting, but when you're talking about an 8 or 9 episode podcast series, I mean, it's essentially you're writing a book, right? And so you're like, do we have enough here to carry this? But that being said, like sometimes making yourself uncomfortable is the way to find new creativity or to challenge yourself to find a smart idea within that, because yeah, we could have just looked for something that was like, oh, this is a very straightforward story. We can just cover it like any other true crime podcast. And, that's easy to do. Like, we understand the genre. But it was out of that idea of understanding the genre that, Leah and I were able to make that perhaps more interesting to us. And by extension, you hope the audience also finds that interesting.
Yeah, how did you land on this idea to use this Zuber story as a vector to interrogate the true crime genre?
There's always a moment in every show that we've done where Ryan says to me, maybe we try and do this in 6 episodes or 5 episodes. And I'm like, no way, it's 9 to 10 episodes. And we usually find some path in the middle. But, we knew, okay, if we're going to give this a fair shake, first thing we have to do is see if the family will be on board. Doesn't mean we wouldn't do this story if they weren't, but if they are, let's get that interview scheduled. So we had a very early interview with Randy and Rebecca Zuber, Sarah Zuber's parents. And it was such a good interview that I think that it was very emotional. And I think Ryan and I have both been doing this long enough to know, like, this could go a couple of different ways. We could just do this as like a murder story or whatever, and only a certain people will listen to it because some people just avoid that kind of, if it bleeds, it leads coverage. I think we also both took a little bit of a particular issue sometimes in the past with our shows being labeled as true crime because it just felt very reductive of like what we were trying to do. Yeah, I think it was a combination of those two things. If this is siloed as a true crime show, is that doing service to the Zubers in them sharing this incredibly emotional, powerful story with us?
Yeah. And I think beyond that too, like as soon as we got up to Columbia County, we could see pretty quickly there was a lot of interesting dynamics playing out there, and there's a lot of interesting characters up there. And so it was pretty quick, I think, that we were like, oh, what if we just expand a little bit beyond this particular case to look at the broader dynamics here? And then going to a true crime class, it was like, oh, this is like super helpful to like think about this, of like these 3 groups that tell these stories in every single one of these true crime stories. It's always the police, the media, and the community. And so what if we start looking at how those groups were telling this particular story. And from that point forward, it was like, oh, this is like interesting. There's a lot of people we can talk to here about this.
Yeah, one of the several things I've written down was like, when did you know you were gonna go to school, go to class, and go to Justin St. Germain's class at OSU? Like, when did that strike you? It was like, oh, this is a good device.
I mean, I had been on a panel the spring before we had come up with our Hush Season 2 idea with Justin St. Germain. We were both on a panel about true crime at Linfield, and we were both talking about how we both really disliked it. And I just thought, like, that's so interesting. And he talked about his book and that his mother was murdered, and he wrote this memoir about it. And I read it kind of just as a fan of what he was talking about. So yeah, when we came up with the idea, I was just trying to think of new things we could do. And I was like, Ryan, I met this guy. He's a professor. He teaches this class called True Crime 101. If we want to go down this route, I'm pretty sure he would let us come. And he was stoked that we were, sort of thinking about it in the same way that he was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's what I loved when you were talking to him. There was this moment of like kind of like the utility of telling these stories, and then like he said, like, it's totally within your right to do this. And then Ryan, you were like, but is it? Are there certain things that maybe you should just let lie? Like, what is our purpose here? And that's kind of the ethical quandary of doing this kind of journalism too.
And that was really based out of an experience I had. I worked on a show called The Fault Line: Dying for a Fight, and it was about this young man in Portland who was murdered, and the police kind of slow walked the investigation. And during the process of reporting that, it was very challenging for his mother and like caused a lot of emotional pain for her, which, as a journalist, as a reporter, like is not ideal. I don't want to be doing reporting that is like hurting people. And I think ultimately, that show was helpful. Like it ended up locking up the person who did it, who had been evading arrest for years and years. But during that process, it was very emotional and challenging. And that was more, my own personal experience of like, shit, did I make a bad decision by even doing this story because of what it's doing to this person? What is the use of this? So that's really where that was coming from. And I was worried. I was like, I don't want to do that to somebody again if there's not a point to that.
I think this is one thing that's really critical and important about the reporting producer relationship that Ryan and I have established over the years is that we are allowing each other to kind of be squeamish sometimes about reporting. There were things that happened in Hush Season 2 where I was like, I'm not comfortable. And Ryan was like, I'm not sure, like we would really talk about, I think we're willing to kind of throw out a lot of the norms of journalism and say like, are we personally okay with this? Like door knocking, if you're going to the door of somebody who's just lost a loved one, that's a very normal thing in journalism where there's a horrible thing that happens and reporters show up on that front lawn and you have cameras and things like that. And I think we are of the mind together to question, is that the kind of journalism we want to practice? Where you're victimizing people who've already been victimized. I think in all the shows we made together, that's been an active conversation. Like, what is our role? How can we change that? Where does the media go wrong with stories like this? How can we do things differently?
In terms of using the phrasing you used earlier, Leah, about the idea widening, and I feel like that happened with this. I don't know if it happened naturally or through rigor and structure. What was the experience of seeing this idea widen maybe before your eyes?
I mean, I'd be curious how Ryan would answer that. I do think that the most common reporting technique that I have done as long as I've been doing long form narrative journalism is to find a small element and then build it out from there. So like I can think of, we may have talked a long time ago, I wrote a story about this earthworm and like that people couldn't find it on the Palouse and in Washington state. And so I wrote this whole story about how there were all these environmentalists that wanted to protect the land over this earthworm that no one had ever seen. And then there were all these farmers saying, like, this is insane that we're going to protect a species that no one has seen before. And so it was about this kind of like struggle, but really the smallest literal element was this earthworm. And so I think that, like, in a way, like, I apply that earthworm treatment to a lot of the pieces that I do. And it's very satisfying because it shows you, like, you know, it's like a stone dropped in water and you just are observing the ripples that go out from there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we're always eager to tell the biggest story possible, and nothing happens in a vacuum. I think it's a kind of bad journalism, honestly, to be like, these two people are involved and they said this, and, you know, that's the end of it, and that's the context. It's always looking for the biggest context possible. But, you know, you had asked, like, what did it feel like? It always, I mean, it feels amazing when you're like, oh, I get what we're doing now. Like, because you're so early on, you just have to trust you're going to get to that point. And if you think too much about, like, why are we not at that point? Why should we be there by now? We've been reporting for like 3 months. We should know clearly what's happening. If you overthink that, it's really anxiety inducing, but you just have to kind of trust that you're going to get there. And then when you finally do, you're like, I knew we were going to get here. I knew the whole time we were going to get here. So
it's part of why we record a lot of our conversations, because we weren't sure, you know, there were a lot of times we're like, do we want to record us talking? Like, it's so annoying. It's so much tape to go through and stuff. But we did do it because we wanted the listener to feel a little bit of that stress of like, what is our role here and what exactly are we doing?
Yeah, and bringing up that point, Leah, I love some of the whiteboard conversations that you do track into this season of you just thinking about, you know, where certain narrative elements are going, just the questions you're looking to ask, how you're looking to just structure your reporting going forward. So just maybe to take us to that behind the scenes a bit of you guys, grinding over, you know, the whiteboard and how to proceed.
So I remember when we had our first whiteboard conversation, it was like, okay, we've both gone through the majority of the police files that we can get. We've both read it. It's a good idea for us to sit down and kind of like distill our thoughts. But I would say we had a pretty preliminary storyboarding session. It was Ryan's idea. I was probably a lot more resistant to it than he was. But in the end, it was a very good idea because it started to show us, like, if we were to start thinking about how to plot this out in the story, not saying any of this is permanent, but if we are, where would we go? And in a way, you could start to look at a rough episode structure as like a series of buckets of reporting and say, like, okay, so if we're going to do a whole episode on the media, we got a lot of reporting we got to do there. So it just kind of helped us plan.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it helps me, you know, personally just visually see, like, okay, this person is this character. We're talking to them about that might go well with this person, and just having it on a board and being able to move those pieces around and say, like, okay, which elements kind of work together or might say something bigger. And because it is, I mean, early on, it's just a lot of puzzle pieces. It's like solving a puzzle without a picture of what the puzzle is, and you have to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of times with a piece of writing or in book writing, sometimes I talk to people and about their drafting, and I ask them, you know, when does the shape of it start to really coalesce and come into focus? And for you, when you guys were preliminarily reporting this out, you know, when did some of those pieces and those buckets that you say, Leah, like, when did that start to crystallize? You're like, oh, okay, now the shape, the image on the puzzle box is starting to reveal itself.
I think where my mind goes is when we started to find extremely compelling characters. So, for example, you know, Jennifer Massey is a character that we met extremely early in our reporting and is a fascinating, energetic person. And so we knew, okay, well, we're going to want to follow her. Then later we went and met with the newspaper reporter in town, and he was just so funny and had this great, like, you know, he sounded great on mic. He has a really interesting voice and stuff. So I think, you know, to me, it was like we started finding these characters and we were like, well, how are they going to come into the story? How are they going to tell it?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that is the challenging thing about audio too, is it's not just what is the information you're getting, but how how does that person sound on mic? Are they kind of dull and slow as a speaker, which is, may work fine in a book because you can just, write the quote and it reads like every other quote. But, finding someone who's really a dynamic speaker, or they're super energetic, or they might play a significant role. I mean, I think we lucked out with Jennifer Massey because she ended up playing a gigantic role, and it changed over the course of what we're doing, which is what you're looking for in characters, right? You want characters who are acting on the world and changing over the course of a story. And she was all of that, so.
Yeah, you hear, I've heard Ira Glass talk about all of the stories that they kill with This American Life, because a story might be great, but if someone's not good on mic and they're
Yes.
just boring on tape, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter how good the story is, you still need good talkers.
Yes.
And if you're not a good talker, it's like, it doesn't work.
And I think that, so we have like a little bit of an alchemy that comes together. Like there's, Ryan and Leah tape where it's like, we just like to talk to each other and, we have a certain dynamic and it can be a little bit funny. So there's that. Then you have characters, like these good characters. But for us, we're always wanting to create good tape in the way that we report. So driving the back roads, walking through the woods, knocking on doors, and then archival audio. So like we're always seeking 911 calls, phone calls to the police department, YouTube videos and things like that. Just so there's this kind of rich texture, this kind of palette that you hear come into play in each episode.
With YouTube videos, do you just hold up your microphone to like your computer speaker to get audio? Like, how do you?
They have technology for that, Brandon.
There is, or
You
these
can
are some
record
things
the
I don't
audio.
know.
You can, if you have a Mac, here, we'll give a little technical advice. If you have a Mac, you can use a program called Audio Hijack. Okay. It will automatically record the audio playing out of your web browser.
Okay, audio. I'm gonna write that down.
Producer Ryan.
Audio
right.
hijack.
Yeah, this is my job.
Yeah.
Figure out the technical problems.
I'm always like, Ryan, I got this YouTube we need. Here, can you get the audio?
Oh my God. Yeah, and like, for example, so one episode you focus on Vishal Christian, who was Sarah's boyfriend when she passed, and that's an episode that really focuses on the boyfriend there, and you characterize him and you speak with them as a group and everything. So when you're thinking about how you're going to orchestrate those interviews and, what are the conversations you are having as you're looking to, not choreograph's the wrong word, but there is an element of choreography when you're going into these kind of interviews. So like, what's the conversations you're having, and then how do you then set up and execute it?
Yeah, I think like for that one, we had a little bit of a strategy. Like, here is this person whose name has been thrown around willy-nilly by all kinds of people in the county. He might not want to talk to us. So let's just call and say, look, we're taking a long view on this story. It's going to take us a year or more to work on it. We'd like to talk to you multiple times, which we did. If you're curious about us, there's a whole bunch of material online that you can listen to and kind of get our approach. And, in the case of Vishal, that was very helpful. He was like, okay, I see what you're doing. I see what you've done. I do want to talk to you. And I still really care about what happened to Sarah. So I would like some resolution to that too. In other cases, it doesn't work and people see some of the stuff that we've worked on and they're like, oh, hell no, I don't want to talk to people like you. So yeah, that's a little bit of our approach there.
I mean, yeah, and just to follow up, I think we're always thinking, how is this person going to respond? And that comes down to who's calling that person and making the ask. Who do we think they might respond to better and be more open to? Because, ultimately we want to hear from everybody in a story. We try not to go in with any kind of preconceived notion of like who this person is or what they think about something. And so we're often coming from, a very genuine place of just like, I think it would be good to hear from you. I think it would be informative for people to hear from you. And, most of the time that works. The places where you can get a little tripped up is, Leah and I do a lot of accountability reporting. And so when people can understand that we are like talking to them from an accountability perspective, that's where, they might be a little more standoffish or like not want to do that. But you still have to try every avenue. And that means like, even if you say no once, I might call you in 3 months and say like, hey, like still here. Like you thought any more about that?
Yeah, I mean, and to be a little bit more frank, like there are times that there are people in the show that I called that they hung up on me, and then Ryan called and they wanted to be
Yeah.
pals. So we acknowledge that is real and sometimes can be useful.
Yeah, and what you're talking about too, and it can be all the more challenging, especially when you're, doing accountability reporting, which can come across as like, oh, you're calling into question someone's work and how they go about their work, and then earning trust to get them to talk to you. And that can be a pitch over the phone or it could be an email. But, what is the challenge of earning that trust and trying to get these people to freely speak on the record, when questioning could get challenging?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to, your everyday person, I think we come in just as Ryan said and said, look, we want to hear your side of the story. Sounds like there's been a lot of conversation, controversy, confusion. Tell us about that. If you want to talk about that the media did a bad job reporting on this story and your part in it, tell us that. We want to hear it all. And so I think being open to sort of wiping the slate clean with people and saying, let's start from scratch. Let's hear it from, your perspective. But also, we're going to do a lot of reporting, probably more reporting than you can imagine. So we're going to fact check everything you say too. So yeah, I mean, maybe Ryan, you want to talk a little bit about the approach with like people in power.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Leah said earlier about we work on long-term projects is really helpful because people are more willing to open up, because most of the time when I'm having those first conversations with like a detective, I'm just like, hey, not on the record, we're not recording, like I just want to talk to you, like here's what we're doing, here's why I think it would be helpful for you to participate, let's talk about how you feel about that, what reassurances you might need, or what might help you get to a point of talking, and we can talk about all those things off the record. So just taking that long-term approach can be really helpful. But as Leah said, I think, sadly, there's often a gender dynamic to a lot of these things. Like I'm the one calling the detectives just because,
You're a dude.
unfortunately, police detectives do not want to be questioned by a woman sometimes. And, I can build that relationship and get us in the room. And then, I'm like, here's my colleague. She's going to ask you a lot of questions. So
Yeah. And that's always fun. There are times especially, I mean, in multiple times where we've interviewed law enforcement where I ask the questions and they give the answer to Ryan until those questions start to get really hard. And then they're like, oh, this lady seems to know what she's talking about. It's fun.
A moment ago, you were talking in talking to Vishal. He expressed like, oh, he would like to have some degree of resolution, and that is something you wrestle with. Like, what if you can't provide that satisfactory true crime resolution, solve the case, and get the right person behind bars, and bring peace to the family? It's one of those things where, yeah, like you had to grapple with maybe not coming up with the answer. So like when did that get on your table? Be like, oh, this might not wrap up in the way that people might expect.
Boy, I don't know. I mean, Ryan, I feel like we were reporting far, far longer than either of us wanted to.
So much
because
further.
we were like, the show is going to come out in October. By, June, July, we should be finished. But we were still making calls in like early September just to see if we could get it one step over the line, knowing, our last episode isn't going to come out still until, late November. Maybe there's still something we can find. Maybe there, and so, yeah, I mean, you hear us in the show literally pull over into a parking lot in Columbia County. And we sat there for an hour and a half being like, how are we going to end this thing? Like, we did not know.
Yeah, it's a challenge with stories like this. I mean, this was part of my hesitance of taking a unsolved death story, because they can be challenging, and you have that impulse, like you always have that impulse of like, just one more phone call. Maybe this is going to be the one. I mean, there's so many times in this process where Leah and I were like, we got it. We figured
We got
it
it.
out.
Here we go. Yeah.
And that's like, shit, that's not it.
Yeah. I mean, dozens of times. Ryan calling me on a Saturday and being like, I just talked to the person who carried the mail on the road. I think I got it, and thinking that we were there. But, I think we always were having conversations about if we can't solve it.
Mhm.
What is this about? Why isn't it solved? And what is our job? Is the job of a journalist to solve crimes? No, it's to document. So what are we documenting? We're documenting what had to happen for there to be no answer in a situation where there should be an answer.
Yeah, and partly of digging into this too, and then bringing the family back into it is like you might be giving them false hope. And so what was that ethical dilemma that maybe you were wrestling with through the entirety of your reporting?
I mean, Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure every time we sat down with Rebecca and Randy Zuber, we said to them, we cannot make any promises.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that was really important. I mean, again, that was kind of like important to me personally, based upon my past reporting experiences, to just be as transparent as possible and speaking to them and being available to them. I can't tell you, I text with Randy Zuber probably every other day during this process of just, I mean, these are grieving parents. They're dealing with something that's like the worst possible thing that could happen to somebody. And you have to understand, I think, as a journalist, that they're real people. They're not just like folks in a story, and they are going to want answers from you, and you have to be having hard conversations of like, I don't know if I can be that. That is not my role here. I want to, like, I'm going to do everything in my power to try to do that, but at the end of this process, that may not be the case, and I need you to know that from the start, so you are not making assumptions about what is going to happen here.
Yeah, and I think in our first interview with the Zubers, Randy said something that stuck with both Ryan and I in a big way, which is like, I'm just a garbage man, and my wife is a homeschool mom, and like maybe we don't matter. And I think that just spoke so to the heart of why Ryan and I make journalism, is to like tell stories of people who do feel overlooked and who feel like they don't have any power. And we would say to them, what happened to Sarah matters to us. And we're going to show you in the best way that we can that, her death is not just lost. Like, we might not figure it out, but we will give it a lot of attention.
It's been 6 years, but I imagine the work you're doing is refreshing it. And you can't promise something good will happen, but I imagine you might have accelerated the process by which something might happen.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's right, for sure.
Yeah, so I guess that's the utility of it all, like, because you're using, not using, that's the wrong word, but here's a good vector. Here are these people who are a good vector to tell this exploration of like the genre, for art and for entertainment. But also, you're trying to put pressure on public figures too. So there's all these moving parts too that can make you maybe feel icky on the one side. But I was like, oh, but we are trying to do some good over here as well.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that surprised me was the media part of the story. When we got out there in Columbia County and we just started to see what are the effects when like local journalism is disappearing from so many places. And I can't tell you how many people have reached out to me after the show to be like, oh my God, this is exactly what my town is like. I grew up in a very rural place in a very small town, and people are just like, oh, this is exactly like XYZ thing that happened here, and it's just on Facebook and everybody's talking about it. And I was like, oh man, we like tapped into what is happening in local communities as newspapers are dying, and it's bad. It's very bad, and we need to like find an answer to that, which I think, is one of those things that we were able to elevate in a show like this that maybe otherwise wouldn't have been covered, or maybe people would just ignore because they feel like, oh, it's just what's happening. There's no way to counteract that.
Yeah, was that an element of the reporting and the storytelling of this season that kind of surprised you? Like, oh, this is a chance for us to really investigate or interrogate, what it means to lose small local journalism, like how important it is, and when that vacuum gets filled with algorithmically driven slop and rumor.
Yeah, totally. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I remember that there was a moment we were eating lunch after we'd done a day of interviews, and we're sitting there and we're like, wait, maybe the show we're making is actually about journalism. Like maybe people are going to think that they're coming into a true crime show, but then they listen far enough and they realize this is actually about information and the lack of. So yeah, it's not what we set out to do at all. But once we couldn't find information and we're like, there's ground that we're treading as journalists that people haven't touched here. And we're 6 years into the case. Like that says a lot about this place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a moment too in that episode about the closing of the paper, and in that one of those issues, it might have been the last one, or it might have been, it had to do with the 24-hour police surveillance getting cut. What goes to show is like the people complaining, be like, "What are you doing? You're drawing attention. Now all the crime is going to come here," and they're like getting mad at the news outlet. It's like no, the news outlet is reporting on this thing. You need to get mad at the people in power. Like your anger is directed at the wrong place, and I think that underscores, like, people get mad at the reporters. They're just giving you the facts. You need to get people. If you don't want this to happen, you got to go to the. It's not going away because the reporters like reported on it or didn't report on it. It's going away because of those people, and we're just telling you what's happening. Like, redirect your anger over there.
I mean, I love that you had that reaction because you hear us really laughing about that, because I think as journalists, we've all been in that position where you're like, why are you getting mad at me? Like, I'm just talking about it. We're just not supposed to talk about a thing, and but we were laughing pretty hard about that with Will Laurie, the reporter there.
Yeah, like all the criminals, they're all going to flock to Rainier, Oregon now because of this. Like... But I love that, Leah, that you brought up how reporting on the journalism and the commentary about what happens when newspapers fold up in small towns, like that was an element of the discovery that surprised you. And just over the course of your reporting for this, what other elements of this story really did illuminate and surprise you?
I mean, it's hard to pick one. I think that probably one of the biggest surprises for me was the complications to Jennifer Massey's character, for lack of a better term, that the person that we first sat down with, to us seemed to be an aggressive citizen who understands power and understands the importance of transparency in government. And you go through the series and you start to see that purity gets muddled quite a bit for a lot of reasons. So that was a huge shock. Actually, it was crazy because, when we started reporting in Columbia County, it was like, oh, the sleepy county where nothing happens. And then all this insane stuff happened, like the sex abuse scandal at St. Helens High School. I mean, there were so many scandals that happened in the year we were reporting on Columbia County. We were just like, wait, what happened? Is this how this place is? And just nobody knows. And so that was a huge surprise too.
Yeah, I think it was a lesson in like being open as you're reporting to following where the reporting is going, because we could have just ignored all of that stuff. But what we found was by allowing ourselves to track what's happening in the community, this abuse scandal that was covered up really in the high school, and who are the people involved in that and why are they covering this up? And then suddenly seeing like, oh, well, what else is being covered up? Oh, well, Jennifer Massey is, you mentioned the 24/7 police service, like that becomes a giant plot point of like, was she involved with like orchestrating that story to basically win an election? And so you start to question all these people who are around you, and you just have to, as a reporter, you can't be rooted in like, oh, these are the good guys, these are the bad guys, because I think, Leah has a really fantastic line in the series, which is just talking about, how people are complicated and there is no simple story, and you just have to be open to that complication. And I think it makes the show better. Like, it feels uneasy as a storyteller to allow that complication in, but it's actually the secret sauce to make a really great story.
As you're thinking about the structure of the entire series and you're settling on, say, 8 episodes, how were you guys thinking about just plotting things out and teasing the right information out to sustain the momentum for those 8 episodes?
Yeah, I like to come in all long form writing I do, whether it's audio or written. I like to come out really hot in the first episode or the first paragraph. Like, if there's an explosion, the explosion is happening in the first paragraph. If somebody's dying, they die in the first paragraph. Get it all out on the table. Like, I think throwing cold water on people is a good idea, but there has to be satisfying kind of teasers that go into each episode. So a lot of times we'll say, like, okay, this episode will get us to this, and that'll be our cliffhanger that'll go to the next episode. So we're always looking for where are the cliffhangers that are going to keep people reading or, listening. And it's always the last episodes that we're like, are pretty TBD for a while. Like, the last episode of Hush in August, I was like, Ryan, when are you going to read this episode? Like, do you remember that? I was like, are you avoiding this? I was like, are you avoiding reading this? Because there's that finish, you're finishing and you're like, are we ready to finish? Is it done? Is there really nothing more we can do? So
I think it's really interesting too, because like with podcasting, I mean, unlike like if you write a book, you don't really know how people are reading it and how they're experiencing it. With podcasting, it's like you have all this data. You can see where people drop off, and what are the points in a series when you typically lose an audience, and when do they come back? And it's always fascinating to me, the people who listen to the first and the last episode. Those are always like the most listened to. And I'm like, this is like, do people do this? Where it's just like, I skip all the crap in the middle. So how do you make it interesting to make them want to like pull along the whole way? And as Leah said, like, what are your cliffhangers between episodes? And I think there's some funny things in this show, because we are like taking such a meta approach to the genre, of sometimes breaking the fourth wall and being like, here's what you're probably thinking right now. That's not true. Or here's what I could do right now. I'm going to do this other thing. And just like calling that out a little bit. You're always thinking like that when you're plotting out a long series like this.
Yeah, there's one moment that just jumps out to mind is it might be in the second episode, or it might even be the first one, where like, Leah, you say like, right now, like, I know more information than you do, and I'm sitting on this information basically to just keep you coming back. And it's one of those, it's that meta commentary. It's just like, here you are, like, I know more than you right now. That's one of those hat tips where you're talking about it. You're like, I'm acknowledging that this is the truth of this format.
There is some storytelling happening here. Yeah. And that was a big thing where we're like, either we do this meta criticism, if we're going to do it, we have to completely lean into it hard. Like, or because if we just sort of half-ass it, it's just not going to work. So yes, some lines like that. Ryan wrote that line, if I know more than you know, and you know that. And like, I think that was like let's all be honest about what we're doing here, right? We're listening to a story about a girl's death, and we're going to roll that out in a way that keeps you going.
What are some of the more satisfying elements of doing this kind of investigative reporting?
I mean, I think there's, I'm just speaking for myself as a reporter, like the exciting part is always like, oh, I figured out something that nobody else knows about this, and being like, I am bringing new information forward about this. And we're always looking for those, we're always like, what's the bombshell? What are you doing that is going to like astound people? In the first season of Hush, we have this interview with this detective who like, this entire department's like, we're not racist. And then he's like dropping N-bombs in this interview, and we're like, holy shit, what is happening right now? Yeah. And so like when you have that, when you're like, oh, I have this piece that is like so interesting and exciting, you're like, I can't wait for people to hear this, because their minds are going to be blown by this. So I mean, that element is like always a driving part for myself.
I think that you will not find two people in this world who enjoy a good interview more than Ryan and I. And there are times that we do interviews specifically with law enforcement that I think we really show our mastery of the case. We go in and we're like, we don't want to have a mid-level conversation with you. We're going to have a very high-level conversation. And specifically in this season, there was a moment where we were talking to the lead detective on this case, and he just said, hang on. And he got out a notepad and started writing down what we knew. And I said to him, look, we're going to go talk to this guy right now that you haven't talked to. Do you want to come with us? And he's like, just give me a week. Just give me 1 week before you do that. And I think that is, for me, this is part of the reason I think, there's so many reasons not to be a journalist, but this is one reason where you're like, I'm doing something. I'm holding people in power to account. I'm reminding them of why they are paid with taxpayer dollars. And I'm challenging them because that's the job, right? Like, you're not supposed to get cozy to power. You're supposed to challenge it in big and small ways. And so that's very satisfying. And to be able to go to the Zubers at the end of the show and say, okay, here's everything we found, that was very satisfying.
Mm. Yeah, and this is very time-intensive work and financially intensive work. Just speak to how expensive it is to get a hold of public records.
It can be extremely expensive. It depends who you're dealing with. I mean, here in Oregon, I think we lucked out, honestly, in Columbia County. I think people were fairly cooperative and were not restrictive, but Oregon's public records law has enough leeway in it where if someone wants to be a pain in the ass, they can be. And, we put that forward. Like, the public can decide, like, is this person being reasonable or not? More often than not, people think public records should be free and they should be public. I mean, that's my viewpoint. And, you have to, much like when you're negotiating whether someone's going to give an interview, you're negotiating with that public records person. Hey, like, I think this is important. Here's why I think under the law you should release these records. Here's why I think you should not be charging me $1,700 for these, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes you have to pay the cost. Sometimes you can make progress and get there. Leah just had a very funny interaction with the Salem Police Department.
I saw that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a. I think that Hush season 1, the records were more expensive for no reason that I can say other than that we were working with the Salem Police Department, and they are notoriously very expensive with their records. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. And if you want the records and you don't have the legal resources, then you just have to pay them sometimes. So yeah, we were in the multiple thousands for records on Hush season 1. Hush season 2, much, much cheaper because we had a records department that was like friendly to the public.
With this season of Hush, the future of the endeavor is certainly like up in the air, at least with you two creatively, because OPB cut the cord on it. Where do you guys see the trajectory of this kind of work going as you two as a pair, and just where are you taking your talents?
Yeah.
Go for it, right?
First, Leah?
No, you go.
Okay, I'm going first. Well, yeah, I mean, let me say, like, it's incredibly disappointing that OPB decided to end Hush. I think it is the type of work that resonates with people, and is the type, when people talk about journalism, that is what they're talking about. They are talking about journalism that holds powerful people accountable, that gets the full story, that is not gotcha. It is not trying to like be clickbait. It is thorough reporting. And, you're right. That is expensive to some degree. But, for an organization of OPB size and resources to do that, I think is incredibly disappointing. As far as where we go next, I think Leah and I are both, we've both been in the journalism industry for a long time, and we can see what's happening more broadly, where there is this sort of corporate mentality that is taking over tons of media, including public media. When public media lost its funding, suddenly it's like, oh, well, we need to like tighten our belts and stop being ambitious and round the corners off so people don't get upset about, something that's being published. And that's just not what journalism is supposed to be. And so I think Lee and I, we're senior enough reporters that we trust our ability to deliver a good story. And I think going forward, we want to pursue our own endeavor because, even as this media sort of collapse is happening, you see this rising up of independent media, and the structures of how media is done are really changing. And there's opportunity there. There's opportunity to connect with audiences and deliver the type of journalism that we see is valuable and needed in the Western United States. And, I think neither of us is willing to give up on that just because, some decisions are being made outside of our control.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, Brendan, I've been independent for a long time. My relationship with OPB is definitely the one exception to that, so I could work with Ryan. And, it's such an unbelievably disappointing decision by OPB. As he said, they're really pushing that they want to do rural reporting. And so we can't really understand why they would cut a show that's based on rural reporting. But hey, we weren't given answers for it, and we're just accepting it. So yeah, we're going to do our own thing. And I think that, I feel a big surge of energy around the fact that I can be an independent reporter, and now my friend Ryan will also be an independent reporter, and we can get so much done together when you take away the gatekeeping and the barriers that are put up by arbitrary people in doing good reporting. Our job as journalists is to serve our communities and to be beholden to people, not CEOs and people who don't make journalism. So that's what we're getting back to. That's why we both got into this.
Yeah, and advertisers too. Like you don't have to be beholden to that and you'd be like, oh no, like if you publish that, you might lose this big Sunday full page ad or something. It's like, yeah, you're right. It's total like grassroots stuff. Like it's such a drag that it's canceled through OPB because it's definitely like the ads for it are like, we got to close the funding gap, and here it is. This show helped close that funding gap. And they're like, well, fuck you, you're gone now. But I imagine that there is probably a pulse of energy where you guys are like, oh, we're skilled and seasoned enough at this. Like, there's got to be some excitement too of the next chapter. Be like, oh, you know what, we're gonna really be just unbridled with the degree to which we can bring our talents to underreported communities.
Yeah, that's the plan. So we do have a plan to start a small news organization. Ryan, do we want to talk about that specifically, or I don't know?
Break news on Brendan's podcast.
Yeah, I don't know. Like when are you putting your podcast up? Do you know?
Let's see. I was gonna go. I have you for the 26th of December.
Okay,
is that too
so
late?
No, not at all. So
you would definitely be breaking news.
Yeah, so we'll let you break news. So Ryan and I, along with two other reporters who are excellent in the West, Kathleen McLaughlin, who's based in Butte, Montana, and Jonathan Levinson, who is a former OPB reporter based in the Bay Area, we are starting a grassroots news outlet called The Western Edge. Amazing. And we're going to be starting basically on Substack, and we're going to be doing like a newsletter type thing with a podcasting arm of it. And we're going to give it a go. We all have really varied experience in life and in media, but the commonality is that we are people of the West, and we see that this area of the country is very, very overlooked. Yeah. So yeah, we're going to build something from the ground up. It's terrifying and exciting.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, that's great excuse for me to have you guys back on once that is sort of fleshed out and fully formed, and we can talk more about just the trajectory and ambitions and goals for that. Because I know nothing drives you guys more crazy than like an East Coast reporter coming into the Northwest to report and then go back.
Absolutely.
So to have something that's kind of
pine tree air fresheners. Yes. It's just like and that's what we say, like everyone deserves good investigative reporting. Everybody. You don't have to be a certain income bracket or a certain zip code. Like we want to try our best to fill in some of those gaps and give attention to places that have been overlooked.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to unspooling those threads a bit more when the time comes. But yeah, I want to be mindful of your time and bring this conversation down for a landing. Leah knows where I'm going with this next. Ryan, this is going to be your first thing. Oh yeah, nice, both flat-footed. I always love asking for a recommendation of some kind, just something cool that's making you happy, and I would extend that to you guys. What you might be excited to recommend to the listeners out there.
Okay, well, I have a recommendation. So, since we're talking podcasts, I have been listening to Jad Abumrad's Fela Kuti series, Fear No Man, I think is the subtitle on that. It's amazing. Like, if you're into music and you want to know more about Nigeria and just its political history, it is an outstanding podcast. It's 12 episodes. I think it's, but yeah, check it out. It's, I love a good narrative podcast, and it fits that genre, and it's, I learned a lot, which is always what I'm looking for in a good show. So
awesome.
Okay, I got it. So as we've discussed before, I'm a big fan of horror movies, and over the past couple of years, I've been trying to get through all of John Carpenter's movies. So I just watched his very, very first movie last night, which is called Dark Star. It's a sci-fi movie that he co-wrote with a guy as a comedy. It is so bad, but they basically repurposed the plot of Dark Star to become Alien. Later, they were like, the writer was basically like, what if I take this plot that I did with John Carpenter and just make it scary? And it doesn't work as a comedy, but it works great as Alien. So John Carpenter.
Fantastic. Well, Leah and Ryan, so great to talk to you and talk at season 2 of Hush, which was just so engaging and so illuminating. And I listened to it through twice. It was, just an amazing piece of journalism. And I'm just so excited for what you're going to be doing with the Western Edge. So that's really exciting. So just thanks for all the work you've done over the years and the work you're going to be doing. And thanks for coming on the show to talk shop.
Thanks, Brendan. Appreciate it.
Yes. Awesome. We broke news on the podcast. The Western Edge. Nice. Never been done before. Thanks to Ryan and Leah for coming on in tandem to talk about Hush Season 2. The final season, as it were. I miss listening to the show on my 5-mile runs. I said that at the top of the show. And I'll be talking to them more down the road as they get fabulously famous with their new endeavor. Maybe they'll remember little old me, the guy who disses on daily news colleagues. One more time to bury the lead. Fuck that guy. What I hate more than anything is when you look on Instagram or YouTube and you see people posting images of themselves writing in a coffee shop or some shit. So pensive, so thoughtful, so ruminative. This is the writing life. It's such fucking bullshit. These are the people who would rather post with the writer filter and not publish worth a lick. That cabin looks cute. Oh, you're overlooking a mountainscape. Isn't that nice? And doesn't the Paris skyline make you feel like a 1920s expat? Writing, real writing, is ugly as fuck. There is nothing romantic about it. I might be especially sensitive to this because in my early 30s, that guy. I used to post images of myself as a, working writer. And by that, I mean, I literally put on steel-toe boots and work pants and flannel and wrote, standing up primarily, at a literal workbench in my basement at the time because I wanted to convey a workmanship around the bullshit I was producing. It was all for show. Instead of working on better pitches and just getting, better, I was trying to, impress people? Seduce representation based on my working class motif? What a fucking poser. Let's swap out the P in poser and say, what a fucking loser. I see this as a means not to discourage people from doing the work or starting that thing, like quite the opposite. I wanted you to know that it's inexact and that it's very personal and very individualized. And when you see these images of cozy writing nooks, it's all bullshit. Maybe you get to experience that here and there, like a writing retreat and they put you up in a cool cabin, but whatever. I have never experienced that. Maybe one day I will. But let me tell you, it's more often than not that you get somebody like an Andre DeBuse III just in his basement bunker. No windows, no internet, no computers, nothing. Just him and his yellow legal pads and pencils. There's only photographic evidence of this because a newspaper, I believe, did a story on him. That's different. That's attention sought him, not the other way around for his writing setup. Now, I understand the seduction of it, especially in a social media world where the performance often takes precedence over the art. You know, the art we say we want to do. I'm not sure if Austin Kleon coined the phrase, but he popularized it. It is, forget the noun, do the verb. You know, people want to be a writer, a filmmaker, a painter, the noun. But they quickly abandon what actually matters, and that's the verb, the writing, the filmmaking, the painting. Like I said before, the drafting is so ugly, and the more seasoned you get, I'm sorry to admit, the harder it gets. But the more seasoned you become, the quicker you recognize that this is all part of the process. You can say, oh, I've been here before. This is normal. I know what this is like. This sucks. But this is the bad part that eventually gets to good stuff. You need that bad stuff to get to the good. The amateur gives up here. The pro notes it as part of the generation and proceeds. The amateur posts beautiful photos of a cabin overlooking snow-capped pines and calls it writing. The pro hasn't showered for days and adheres to a manageable schedule, turns off the distractions, and pushes through the Pressfieldian resistance. You know what photo I want to see from you, if anything? Your finished manuscript. Everything else is bullshit, and I'm speaking from experience. So stay wild, CNFers, and if you can do, interview. See ya in 2026.